Alright, so now that I got painting the Miata out of the way, I can finally move on to doing some funner modifications, and today we're going to be adding some steering angle. Now, a bunch of people don't know this, but with a bunch of cars that have rack and pinion steering, you can actually get more angle just by adding little washers on the tie rod ends. Now, the second YouTube video I ever made, it was a long time ago and it was absolutely terrible, but in this video I actually talked about these rack spacers and how they give you more angle. Now, before I do anything as far as work goes on the Miata, I'll just show you the E36 because it has rack spacers and it'll give you an idea of what it'll be like on the Miata. Now, the car has 4mm of spacers and it's the only angle mod the car has, and I'm just going to go ahead and hit full lock so we can get an idea of how much angle the Miata is going to have. So it doesn't have a crazy amount of angle, but it's definitely a lot more than stock. And I'm actually going to be adding 5mm worth of spacer on the Miata, so it'll have even more angle. Now I'll show you all exactly how to install these, but before I do that, I'm just going to briefly go over the washers and how they work. Also, I will show you the steering angle the Miata comes with from the factory. It is not much at all, and that way we can get a before and after, just so all of you can get an idea of how much angle you're going to get. As you can see, it is not much at all, especially when you just look at the BMW, and the Miata is going to have even more angle. So it is going to be a very welcome change. So these are the washers, and these are actually really hard to come by. Now, rack spacer is actually a really common mod on the E36, but Miatas, there's not really that much information on them. People just don't drift Miatas as much. But I actually had these special ordered from a company. I'll put the parts number in the description, but they're only $7, and these are actually the dimensions for E36 spacers, but they'll work just fine for the Miata, so I'm going to go with these. Now, these are actually 1mm a piece, so you stack them to get 5mm, and there's actually limits to how many you can add. I believe the Miata is like 5 or 6, so I'm just going to go with 5, but now I'll go ahead and show you how they work. So I've gone ahead and installed one side just so you all can see how these things work. Now, this is your inner tie rod and this is your steering rack, and you can see the spacers are right there. Now, how this works is it effectively lengthens your steering rack and will allow it to go over farther before it hits the bump stop, which is right here on the inner tie rod. It just gives it more travel, which ends up meaning more angle. It's really simple, and I'll show you guys exactly how to do this. But now we got all the boring talking out of the way and we can finally get started. Now, the first thing you're going to have to do is just jack the car off the ground, but after that you just need to remove this little boot here. It connects to the steering rack and inner tie rod. Now all you have to do is just twist off this little metal band thing, and there's a little clip on this side. Then once you've done that, you'll have the inner tie rod end exposed, and you just have to undo this. Now, you'll either need a pipe wrench or a really large adjustable or wrench, just something like that, but you're just going to want to undo this. Now, once you completely loosen it, it'll just pop out the steering rack, and this is your inner tie rod end. This is where you're going to be using the spacers. Let me see if I can get it to focus so you can see clearer. But this tab here, you're actually supposed to bend these flaps up here before you loosen it. This is what locks it in place so it doesn't move or anything like that, which I was too lazy. I just Macho Man Randy Savaged it off. But you're going to want to hammer this off once you've removed it, and then you're going to install your lock spacers. Now, once you remove that locking tab, you can just go ahead and throw your spacers on. They'll go on just like this. Also, another thing, when you add these rack spacers, they extend your steering rack, which pushes your tie rods out and throws off your alignment. Now, this isn't hard to correct. All you have to do is loosen this nut and pull the outer tie rod in the amount of spacers you added. So let's say I'm adding 5mm spacers. I just need to move this over 5mm and your alignment will still be good to go. Now, once you've done that, you're completely good to go. You just need to reverse the process and reinsert the tie rod end. Now, one thing I would definitely do is use Loctite, some thread lock, something like that, because you want that tie rod locked in place. You do not want to be driving down the road, because if it backs out, that tie rod is going to completely fly out and your wheel's going to turn sideways while you're driving. Obviously, you do not want that, so use Loctite. But now that we finished up, we can see how much angle we added. Now, it definitely added a lot more than I thought it would, to be honest. It has even more than the BMW, I think. Not by much, but it definitely does. Now, it'll be hard to tell just by looking, but if I put them back to back, you'll definitely tell a difference. And this is something you'll definitely feel in the car. It's more of a feel thing than a look thing, because it's only going to be a few degrees. But this is about as much as you can possibly add with the stock wheels, and I'll show you why. It's because look at the tire clearance. Here's the tire and here is the lower control arm, and I can't even get my finger in between there. Now, it's not gonna rub or anything, but that is the limit of angle you're gonna add without hitting this wishbone, unless you get lower offset wheels or spacers or something like that. But that's how you can add more angle for under $10, and it seriously only took me like 30 minutes to do. It takes me longer to film and set up shots than to actually do the work. But this works for a bunch of different cars. It works for Miatas, BMWs, and it also works for 240s. Essentially, if your car has rack and pinion steering, you can probably do this. Now, you will have to look up information about it, because with each car, there's certain limitations as far as how much you can add before the steering rack gets all weird. But personally, this is one of the things I recommend most if you're into drifting or trying to learn. It often gets overlooked, but this is a extremely easy, extremely cheap way of getting more angle, which will make it a lot easier to drift. But like I said before, I'll put a link in the description to the washers that I got. And if you have any questions, feel free to ask. I'll try to be as helpful as I can. Now, as far as the channel goes, I know I've been posting a bunch of Miata stuff, and I mean, most of my fan base came because of the BMW, so I'm gonna try and get back to it. Now, obviously I just got this car, so I'm doing a ton of stuff to it. Really, I just want to drift it around. I still have to get insurance and tags and all that, which is being a real pain in my ass because of my driving record, so I'm trying to do all this janky stuff, trying to get that sorted. But there will be a bunch of BMW videos coming, and I have a ton of parts for this car because I'm really excited about this build, and it opens up doors for the BMW. But that is enough talking. Obviously, again, if you guys have any questions, feel free to ask. But until then, guys.